Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're excited to have attorney Mike Shay with us today. He will be discussing SSI and how to work with SSI and the different challenges that people encounter while working with SSI and the difference between Social Security Disability Insurance and Social Security SSI. As well as he'll be talking a little bit about overpayments. Mike Shea is a board certified Social Security attorney. So I mean, he went special training to talk about Social Security and can represent folks in that area. He also works on workers' compensation and those kind of things. He's in the Winston-Salem area. And we just want to thank you again, Mike, for agreeing to come to have this very important conversation and how every time you come, it's just such a hit. So we really want to thank you. That you can put your questions in the Q&A and he will answer them live, realizing also that this is not that the information provided in this video is for informational purposes only. He is not giving you legal advice at this particular time. You need to be a special consultation for those things to happen. This is just general information. So just thank you again, Mike. We look forward for you sharing your information. Thank you again.
Yes, sir. No problem, Curtis. And yes, thank you for that little disclaimer. I always start with that. This is not legal advice. It is not specific to your case or your issue. I'm happy to chat or try to point you in the right direction if you want to reach out to me directly. But really, what I want to talk about today is just exactly what you said, Curtis. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences in SSDI and SSI because there is some confusion there. And then if you're receiving benefits under one program or the other, that's going to kind of dictate maybe the course or the strategy you need to consider if you're hit with an overpayment, if they've alleged you've committed some sort of fraud or omission, or if you need to talk about, can I work a little bit and still get my SSI? Can I work a little bit and still get my SSDI? So those are the three things I really want to cover today. Let me start off. I've done this a few times with you guys. Big plug for Disability Rights NC. I don't work for them. I'm not employed by them. They're just a fantastic group of folks who actually care, who really want to help. They are underfunded and understaffed and all of those things, but they still care. And nowadays in today's society, that's becoming less and less apparent in some people and some entities. Um, if you need me, if you're watching this on YouTube at a later date, or if you need to chat, I don't have all the answers, but I want to say that you're welcome to reach out to me. My email address is M as in Michael Shay, spelled SHAY, law, LAW, at outlook.com. That's mshaylaw at outlook.com. And you're welcome to shoot me an email. Give me as much info or as little info as you want, and I will try my best to get back with you within a day or two with some sort of guidance. And it may be we need to talk or go over some things, but I just don't want you to feel like if you are going through something and you're dealing with SSI or Social Security is giving you the runaround, I don't want you to feel like there's nobody you can reach out to. Start with me, and if I can't help you, I'll point you in a direction. A couple other places you may want to consider in addition to Disability Rights NC. Legal Aid of North Carolina, fantastic group here. They serve all 100 counties here in North Carolina. I can personally plug them because I worked there for 7 years before going off into private practice. It's a fantastic nonprofit group, and they handle some issues relating to SSI and SSDI. Not everything, but some stuff. There's also the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy for those in that kind of geographic area of the state, and Pisgah Legal Services, which is in the western part of the state, near and around Asheville. So there are groups out there. You may have to look for them, but there are folks who care and who want to help and who will at least give you the time of day to hear about your case. Let's start talking about SSDI and SSI. SSDI, also known as Title II disability, is for folks who've paid into the system, basically. I mean, there's always some exceptions here and there, but basically, if you have worked over 40 quarters, which is 10 years, and you have paid into the system out of every paycheck, they've taken a little bit of money and set it aside, then you are likely eligible to draw Title II disability. There's a little catch here, though. They do a recency test. Basically, Social Security says, well, at least 5 of those 10 years have to have come within the past 10 years. So you can't work for 10 years and then take a decade off and then go try to apply for SSDI benefits. They won't give it to you, even though you've put in your quarters and you've paid into the system, because you haven't worked recently enough. They're going to say, we can't help you, at least with SSDI. There are some exceptions. There can be some surviving spouse situations where you can draw SSDI even if you haven't worked 40 quarters. There can be some adult children situations where you just haven't worked enough or paid into the system, and maybe you're drawing off a deceased or disabled parent. Those are very technical. But for most folks, when you think of SSDI, you think of folks who have worked a lot, paid into the system, and has had something happen to them where now they go to Social Security and say, hey, I'm not asking for $1 million here. I just need a little bit of help month to month to make sure I can, feed my family and make ends meet. Um, the distinction between SSDI, Title II disability, and SSI is this. I mean, folks who are drawing SSI have not paid into the system, have not worked enough, have not worked long enough, um, for whatever reason. And sometimes it's younger adults, right? So you got somebody who's maybe 22 years old, 23, and they just haven't worked enough quarters and paid enough into the system. Or you have a child, right? Obviously, if you have a child who's 9 years old, they haven't worked. They haven't engaged in any sort of gainful employment. So they're not going to draw SSDI. They're looking to draw SSI based on their disability. I mean, you see it other times. I have folks call who have worked tremendously hard for 30 years. But guess what? They never paid into the system. It has all been under the table. And even though they've worked and worked and worked, it really is about if you've paid into the Social Security fund, the system, as they call it. I see it sometimes with stay-at-home spouses. I mean, there are many scenarios where somebody, for whatever reason, has not worked enough quarters to earn SSDI coverage. And in those situations, everybody falls into this SSI or Title 16 category for disability benefits. Now, to be clear, the standard of disability is exactly the same, that word for word. They are looking at the same thing. Somebody who's 55 and applying for SSDI is held to the same standard as somebody who's 55 and applying for SSI, word for word. It really is just about how much money they might be entitled to and where that money will come from. The SSDI funds are held in one kind of pot, and SSI funds are kind of held in another pot. But again, when you're talking about disability for adults, the standard is the same. It's whether or not this individual has an impairment or a combination of impairments that prevent them from going out and holding down a consistent day in, day out job. Um, when I'm looking at a case or I'm taking a case on, I really don't get into the weeds of are you going to draw SSI or SSDI? It's more about medically what's going on with you. And that's kind of what I want you to take from this for the most part is, medically, if you're unable to work, go apply for benefits. You don't have to articulate or specify, I want to apply for this, I want to apply for that. Most of the time, actually, pretty much every time, Social Security knows what you're eligible for. And a lot of times you'll apply for both. You won't even mean to, but they will take an application for SSDI and for SSI. It's called a concurrent application. You have no clue, but when you come into my office or you go see another lawyer, they'll be able to figure that out. Um, the reason we're kind of talking about these distinctions between SSDI and SSI is because of the programs themselves. Once you are approved and you've started getting your monthly check, there are certain rules that apply to one and not the other, or sometimes apply to both. And let me kind of talk a little bit about Title II, right? Title II SSDI is not as restricted as SSI. Social Security is really going to kind of leave you alone for the most part if you're getting your SSDI benefits. They'll review you medically. They'll take a look at your file every 2 to 5 years and see if there's been any medical improvement. Um, they very much want to know about if you're working, and we're going to talk about that. But otherwise, they kind of leave you alone. You'll get a little bump up at the end of the year. It's called a cost of living adjustment. So SSDI recipients, by and large, don't interact with Social Security quite as much as SSI, as Title 16 recipients. And it's a little bit frustrating for SSI folks because they kind of got my SSI folks under a microscope, and it's tough to kind of keep up with everything. When you're receiving SSI, not only do you have to show that you have these medical conditions that preclude you from working, but then they get real personal with you. All right. Are you married? Are you widowed? Do you have any kids? How old are your kids? Where do your kids live? Do you have a bank account? How much money's in your bank account? If it's over $2,000, you can't get SSI. So think about that. And I think we've talked about this before, Curtis. Since we were kids, you are taught to save and set aside for a rainy day. It is prudent to budget and always have a little bit of money stashed away just in case, right? In case of an emergency, your car tire blows out, whatever, you need to pay your insurance bill, something. But in the SSI world, if you have set aside more than $2,000 and Social Security finds out about that and knows about that, they're going to say, even though you got all that medical stuff going on, we can't give you SSI. And that's called a resource or an asset or a means test. And so SSI recipients are asset and resource tested. You can't have more than one car in your name. That includes the piece of junk 1982 Honda that's sitting out in your backyard and hadn't run in 10 years. If it's in your name and you got another car in your name, that's a problem for SSI recipients. I mean, I can spend hours just talking about that, but the big ones are you can't have any land in your name. You can't have a second home in your name. You can't have non-adjacent property land in your name. I mean, any boats, trailers. I got a guy that they're sweating him because he's got a trailer that's, I guess you got to register a trailer in your name. And so now he's having to like get rid of this trailer in order to qualify for SSI. So I do this not to scare anybody, but just to highlight that with SSI, oftentimes you have to prepare to be scrutinized and you have to be a little more organized and open once you start receiving monthly benefits. Um, and so let's kind of talk, let's kind of transition that into let's talk about these overpayments first. Just because I've been seeing, I'm not a political person, I'm not gonna, that's I'm not the time or the place to talk about that, but I will say this year, 2025, I've received more calls from folks who are being alleged to have been overpaid than in years past. And sometimes it even, stretches where there's allegations of some sort of fraud or some sort of misconduct. And to be clear, I don't think there's as much fraud or misconduct in the Social Security disability program as folks want to think or as folks like to think. I mean, I've done it for 20 years, and it is not some rampant thing that's happening. But right now in 2025, folks are being accused of willfully or wantonly or intentionally or at a minimum negligently failing to do something, failing to report something to the Social Security Administration. And they're getting hit with letters that says, hey, you owe us $80,000 because you forgot to tell us about something back in, 2014 that we think you should have told us about. And so you got these folks scrambling, trying to put out these fires about this alleged overpayment. And so let's kind of talk about this first, because if you are working, I don't care if you're getting SSI or SSDI, if you are working, there is at least a chance somewhere, somehow, that there could be an overpayment. And that's why this is important. That's why this, if you're not working, you're probably going to be fine. There's nothing really to report. I mean, you got to report your changes to your address. Social Security wants to know where you're living. Social Security wants to know, your phone number, that kind of stuff, how to get in touch with you. But if you're not really working, if you don't have any income, this overpayment stuff is probably not going to apply to you. There are some exceptions, but for folks who are working, making a little bit of money, part-time, semi-part-time, under the table, self-employment, like I want y'all to kind of listen up to this, because if you are ever hit with an alleged overpayment, you need to do something and you need to do something quick. If you ignore it, a lot of times you're done, right? They're going to cut your check off. They're going to withhold your check. They're going to assume that they were correct in this alleged overpayment amount. If you're not getting ongoing monthly disability or SSI, they can start garnishing your taxes. Sometimes they can even look at wages. There are things, remember, this is the government. Like, you don't want to mess with the government. There are things they can do to get their money. And even if you were to pass away with an overpayment, if there's somebody surviving you who might draw off of your benefits somehow, they can be on the hook for it. So it's real important that you stay on top of this stuff. So if you're working in any capacity, listen up just for a few minutes. If you get hit with an alleged overpayment, first thing you need to do is get some sort of appeal filed within 30 days. My preference is within 10 days. And what you are doing is you're saying, okay, I disagree with this overpayment. Let's figure it out. But in the meantime, I want to continue getting my monthly benefit in the amount that I'm entitled to. If you wait and try to do something beyond that, 60 days, 90 days, you try to file some appeal at a later date, they may accept your appeal, but you're not going to continue to get your monthly check. And the reason that's important is sometimes these appeals, even for an overpayment, could take a year, year and a half, 2 years. And you want to make sure you're getting paid while you're trying to figure this out, while you've gone to get a lawyer, while you've reached out to disability rights, whatever. When you're figuring out if this is a real overpayment or what is the correct amount of this overpayment, you want to make sure you're getting your monthly check. So it's real important within the first 30 days, you file an appeal. When you're filing an appeal, you're basically saying, you don't have to give the exact reason, but just, I disagree with this overpayment. I believe it to be incorrect. And there is a specific form online that is for this appeal. Now, I want to be clear. There is a second process that goes with overpayments called a waiver of overpayment. That is a completely different form. It's a completely different consideration, but you can do both of them at the exact same time. They're separate, but I think they are basically 1A and 1B. Like, there's not really a ton of scenarios where you would file an appeal and not an overpayment, or not a waiver of overpayment. And there's not a bunch of scenarios where you would not, file the waiver of overpayment and not the appeal. Like, I think they kind of go hand in hand. And I've seen cases get resolved in one path, on appeal. I've seen cases get resolved on another path, waiver of overpayment. Frankly, for us, it doesn't matter how it gets resolved. We just want it done. Now, the waiver of overpayment is basically where you're saying that you were not at fault for the overpayment, and you are unable to pay back the amount that they're asking for. And they do get personal when you're filling out the waiver of overpayment. They're going to ask you to fill out details about your expenses, your monthly income. All right, you're getting $1,400 a month in disability, and you got to show us how much is your rent, how much is your mortgage, how much is your utility bills, how much do you spend on food, how much do you spend on transportation, da 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 da. I mean, details. And at the end of that form, you basically got to show that the amount you have coming in is equal to the amount you got going out each month. There's nothing left over. Because if you do your budget and at the end of your budget, you got like an extra $1,000 sitting around every month, overpayment or the waiver of overpayment is going to be tough. Like Social Security is going to say, hey, look, you you're able to make ends meet. You've got $1,000 extra every month. Like you can afford to start paying back this overpayment. So it's real important. You got to be honest. You got to be open. And sometimes you have folks who have extra money at the end of the month. It's amazing to think, but there are people out there that have extra money left over every month. I think for most folks, it's negative, right? I mean, it's quite literally negative money. I've got $1,400 coming in each month, but my expenses are $1,700. So I'm negative $300. If you can show that, you have a pretty good chance of getting an overpayment waived. Um, there's no deadline to file a waiver of overpayment. Remember that appeal I want filed within 30 days. You can file a waiver of overpayment at any point in time. Even if your case has been sitting there for 6 months or a year, you can still file a waiver of overpayment. Just be prepared to show your household expenses, and you are going to have to show that this overpayment wasn't your fault, right? What I see most right now are folks coming into my office asking to file an appeal or asking for information about waiver of overpayment. And I say, well, what's going on? Like, what has Social Security said has happened? Like, what's the issue? And 9 times out of 10, it has something to do with, well, I was working and I was turning in my pay stubs as best I could. I mean, maybe I didn't do it every month, but I was trying to keep Social Security. And then I don't know, I moved and I forgot to tell them I moved, and then I changed jobs, and I forgot to tell them I changed jobs. But I would give them my pay stubs sometimes. And here we sit, right? Social Security has said, well, you were working and you said you gave us some pay stubs. We don't have any record of that. So now we're going to say that you owe us $12,000 for the past, year that you've been working. And it's hard. And that's kind of what I want to transition to when you're talking about work. This isn't just for an overpayment issue. This is important because Social Security is going to assume the worst. If you don't tell Social Security that you're working, they're going to assume it was with malice, right? That it was intentional, that you are hiding something from them. You're trying to pull one over on the government. I mean, you won't go to jail, but they come right out of the gate with that assumption. It's never, hey, we might have screwed something up. Let's work through this together. Or it's never like, hey, this might have been a complete accident. Let's chat. It's never like a collaborative approach to trying to solve this problem. It is very much, you have screwed something up, you the claimant, And now you got to show us that you didn't. So when you are working, right? So one of my favorite clients called me about a month ago, 2 months, and she's starting this little job at Bojangles. I'm talking like 8 hours a week, little job. And I said, all right, we can do this. Here's how you're going to have to do it. Every single paycheck that you get, every pay stub, physical pay stub, I want them to put it in your hand. And then you're going to do one of three or four things. You're going to physically take it to the Social Security field office here in Winston-Salem. You're going to take a number. You're going to wait in line, and you're going to hand it over to them. And not only that, you're going to have them initial something or sign something saying, hey, we received this pay stub. It's ridiculous. I don't recommend that. But for some folks, that's really the only option. You I'm serious about that. If you're physically hand delivering something to the Social Security field office, I've been to pretty much everyone in the state of North Carolina. Most of them have this little drop box. Right when you walk in the door, it'll be off to the right or off to the left. And it'll say, leave this, you kind of pull it open, you drop your thing in, boom, I've done my job. I'm a good person. I've turned in this paperwork as I'm supposed to. But I can't tell you how many times that drop box magically things just go missing. So if you're going to physically go and turn in something about your work, I want you being extra safe. I want you got to just kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I want you making sure that you get somebody at Social Security to acknowledge that you physically hand delivered on this date, this document, and you leave that office with something in your hand saying, boom, I don't know what this person's name is, but I got his initials, and this is something showing that I dropped this document off. The easier way to do this is fax, right? So with a fax, you at least can get a fax confirmation sheet. But you're not throwing that away. You're not leaving it on the kitchen counter. You're going to have a system in place. I can't tell you what your system's going to be, but you're going to have one in place where every paycheck, every pay stub, anytime you're reporting earnings to Social Security, you're taking that fax cover sheet that shows that it went through, confirmed on this date at this time. You're putting that in that file, right? You're saving it. And you think, oh, well, I've been doing that for 2 years, haven't had any problems. I can probably throw those away, right, Mr. Shay? No, you're holding on to those forever, as far as I'm concerned. You can also, there's a way to upload things. Now, this is getting, it's fine. It's a fine system. You can upload, you can have a My Social Security account and you can upload stuff into your account. If that's your strategy, go for it. I'm not good at technology, and frankly, I know a lot of my SSI clients are not the best with technology on a consistent basis, right? If they're sitting here at my office, we can figure it out, but they can't do that week after week, month after month. I'm imagining some of my folks who are kind of couch surfing or are legitimately homeless, like that is just not a real viable option for some folks. If it works for you, that's great. You can do it online, and I'm okay with that. Um, I want you to establish a relationship. If you are working and you're reporting earnings to the Social Security Administration, I want you to establish a relationship with somebody at the Social Security office, a working relationship. Hey, I sent in my fax, just making sure you got it. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, Mr. Shea, we got you. We got it the other day. Thank you. Just send it in again next month and we appreciate it. If you can have that person's name, if you really want to, ask them for their extension. So that way, when you call their field office, you don't have to wait on hold for 45 minutes. Ask them for their extension, ask them for their name. Sometimes they'll give you their full name, sometimes they'll just give you their first name, their last name, whatever. Any information you can say so you can know that, Mr. B, you talk to him the first week of every month and make sure everything's good to go, you're going to put yourself in a position to avoid any issues down the road. Um, you know, it's hard to go back and try to fix things, or it's hard to go back and argue with Social Security without that documentation. So it seems like I'm being neurotic talking about these fax cover sheets and things like that, but I'm not just making this stuff up. Like I see it regularly enough where if you end up in a scenario where it's like, well, I think I faxed all my stuff in, or I think I dropped it off, but I don't, I don't know, like I don't know when it was, then it's tough. Not saying you can't fix it. You can a lot of times. You can go back and get pay stubs. I mean, I've had clients reach back to old employers and get pay stubs for 3 years. And it ended up being a stack of about, 150 pages. And then we've gone over to the Social Security office with those physical pages. We've waited in line and we've handed them over, and we've been able to kind of crunch the numbers and say, hey, that alleged overpayment of $18,000 actually wasn't an overpayment at all. But man, you talk about a lot of work, you talk about a lot of time. And, frankly, if you're having to do that, a lot of times you're having to pay some lawyer to do that for you. And the last thing you want to do is pay some lawyer $5,000 to go deal with a overpayment issue. It may be worth it in the end, but it's just a tough ask. So the more you can stay on top of things, the better. Um, we may circle back to that in just a minute. Curtis, how long we been on here? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? All right. I got us. Yeah, we're about 30 minutes in. Let's talk about work itself. Okay. And I kind of typed a couple things up because I got this question emailed to me many times. And it's just a catch-all question, but I like it. And we're going to kind of talk about SSI and we're going to talk about SSDI because this is where I can give you some that kind of definite answers. All right. The question is, Mr. Shay, is it possible to work part-time and not lose my disability benefits? All right. Simple enough question. And my response, yes, Mr. So-and-so, I'll leave names out, obviously. It is possible. But the full answer to this question depends on how much you've earned and what kind of disability benefits you are receiving. Is it SSDI or is it SSI? Remember, that's what we talked about earlier. So here's the deal with SSI. If you are receiving SSI and you are working, the Social Security Administration will reduce your SSI benefits by $1 for every $2 you earn after the first $65. Why $65? I don't know. I was told when I was a very young lawyer that that $65 was symbolic of something from like when this program was established 80 years ago or something. I have no clue, but it hadn't changed. It's been sitting at $65 for a long time. So if you're getting SSI and you go out and make $65 a month, guess what? Social Security doesn't care. They don't. Theoretically, anything you make over $65 for every $2 that you make, they're going to withhold or would deduct $1 from your monthly benefit the next month. So let me see, hold on. All right, that's with SSI, right? So if you're working, we're going to do basic math here, and you're making 400, you're getting SSI, which the monthly benefit max for SSI right now is $967. That's the max payment for 2025. If you're getting your $967 and you go get a part-time job, and let's say you make 465 bucks, they don't count the first 65. You've made $400. So Social Security will reduce your next check by $200 to counter balance the $400 that they're counting as income. Now, it gets super cloudy with SSDI. And this is like when I took my board certification test, this is the stuff that I mean some of us lawyers study for months on this kind of stuff. There's a lot of gray area, but let me see if I can kind of just give you a general couple things to consider. If you're getting SSDI, remember you've paid into the system. You're getting a benefit amount based on what you've earned and what you've paid into the system. And you're working a little part-time job. The biggest number, the biggest thing I want you to be aware of is what they call substantial gainful activity. For 2025, that amount is $1,620. If you are earning, and that's gross, that's top of the line. If you are earning more than $1,620 and you're getting disability benefits, we got a problem. We got a problem. It ain't allowed. Okay. Um, if you are under that amount, you're okay. Gray area coming up. Okay. So if you're under $1,620, you're not working at what they call substantial gainful activity, but you're in this gray area. And one of the big things, again, and I'm hesitant to even use technical terms and acronyms because then people's eyes start to glaze over. But here's another number that's important for 2025. And that these numbers go up a little bit each year. But that number is $1,160. If you're earning more than $1,160, but less than $1,620, then you have triggered what's called a trial work period month. And these trial work period months are important because you only get 9 of them over a 5-year period. And so you can earn more than $1,160 and you're still okay, right? You're still okay as long as it's less than 1,620. But guess what? You've triggered one of your 9 trial work period months. And if you continue to earn more than 1,160 months and you hit that 9-month period, then Social Security is going to say, well, okay, you have burned through your trial work period. And now we got to be really, really careful because if you hit SGA, if you hit that 1,620 amount, then they're going to cut you off, and it could be forever, it could be permanent. You might have to reapply, you might not. There's all this is where I can't even get into the wild things that could happen once you've weren't burned through your trial work period. Um, you can get expedited quickly if they cut you off. You could, I mean, it can go in all kinds of directions. So I'm a little hesitant, but let me just kind of hammer home a couple points. That substantial gainful activity amount, $1,620, is an absolute cutoff point on a month-to-month basis. Even if you are $1 over, your Social Security disability benefits will stop after you've used your 9-month trial work period. Doesn't matter what's going on with you medically. Things could go way south. But if somehow you're earning this money, then you may be in trouble. Now, one cool thing about this gray area thing, you can kind of get into this area where you start deducting some stuff. I mean, Curtis, I think in the past you and I have talked about um, income related work expenses, which is an interesting concept. So let's say I made $1,800. I'm over my $1,620 allowance. I've made $1,800. But but I got to pay somebody uh $250 for my wheelchair every month, and I just had to pay somebody to have um a ramp put in at my house and I'm paying that off. These are called income related medical expenses, work expenses. I mean, basically anything, let me get real technical here, anything other than just routine drugs and the amount you pay for insurance. You cannot use those two things. You can't use your Tylenol. You can't use your whatever the out-of-pocket costs for those sorts of drugs. And you can't use your insurance oh no, your monthly insurance costs as a work expense. But guess what? Your insurance copays are deductible. So if you're going to the doctor and you're having these expenses, you can probably use that to get your monthly income down below, right? If you're at 1,800 bucks and you need to find a couple $100, you can go through your income related work expenses and see if there's a way where, you had to buy a cane, you had to buy you know, I mean, sometimes you got to get creative, but see if there are medical expenses that you can use to get back below that substantial gainful activity monthly allowance amount. And I know this is getting technical. I know it's hard, but it's important because sometimes it is the difference in somebody continuing to get their benefits versus not. Um, I'm going to put in a plug for what's called the Ticket to Work program. We're not going to talk about it in any length. Curtis, I will say I went to their website and they have a presentation in October about the Ticket to Work program. I can send you the link. Could be worth checking out because that is a program that is part of Social Security Administration, but it gets a little bit outside of it where if you want to work, if you take a proactive approach, reach out to Social Security and do it through their formal Ticket to Work program, you get a lot of benefits and you can make basically as much money as you want for certain periods of time on a monthly basis and continue to get your disability check. Here's the other cool thing about that. If you're participating in the Ticket to Work program, Social Security cannot review your medical eligibility. They will not. If you're working, not through the Ticket to Work program, just you're working on your own, your little part-time job, I can't sit here and promise that Social Security is not going to review your medical eligibility. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's a coincidence, but sometimes they go hand in hand. I'll get a call from a client. Hey, Mr. Shay, I'm going to go back. I'm making a couple $100 a week. Wish me luck. And then I get a call back 6 months later. Hey, Mr. Shay, I got a letter in the mail. It says they're reviewing my medical eligibility to make sure I'm still disabled. So but again, Ticket to Work program is you have to be proactive. You do work with folks associated with Social Security loosely. And as long as you are doing what they ask of you, you can make some pretty good money, as much as you want, really, and still get your monthly check. So it's an interesting program, but it's not one I'm going to talk about right here, right now. Um, Let me couple more things. I don't want to run too long with you guys. I already said gross income. Um, it's not averaged over the month's work. I do get that question a lot. They're like, "Oh, well, I made $20,000 last year, but you know, 15,000 of it was in the last 3 months of the year." I mean, that's a tough argument to make with Social Security. They're kind of looking at month in, month out, and they're expecting you to report your earnings month in, month out. Um, all right. Is it possible to work part-time and own my own business? So I get this question a lot, and sometimes it's not exactly in this form, but it's some variant of it. Like, hey, I am working as an Uber driver. just when I can, when my back is feeling okay. Or, hey, I'm delivering for DoorDash, or I'm selling stuff on Etsy. I'm making these art things that I sell down at the craft fair every month. Right? I mean, you're just kind of hustling, gig work, whatever you want to call it. Um, the question is it possible to work part-time at my own business? And my answer to that is it is possible. Even though SA's rules allow it to find that a person who's working part-time in his or her own business, even if they're actually losing money, it is possible for SSA to find that they are engaging in substantial gainful activity. So with gig work, with owning your own business, with being self-employed, the focus is less on this hard number of $1,620. Um, it's not that's still relevant, but sometimes I can have folks who are making very, very, very little money, but they're working really, 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 really hard. And they can be at jeopardy, at least theoretically, of losing their disability. And I'll give you kind of an example. I mean, one of the rules that Social Security says if you're working more than 80 hours per month towards your business, SSA will find that you are performing trial work period services. So they're not going as far as saying that is substantial gainful activity, but they are saying if you're working 80 hours a month, not a week, a month, 80 hours a month will count as one of your trial work period months. Those 9 months that they kind of grace you with. So you will be using up a trial work period month if you're working 80 hours towards your business. The other thing, I'm going to pull out my notebook here. The other thing with self-employed people, remember I said it's not so much the 1,620 at the end of the day. They are looking at, they use three different tests for self-employed people. And I'm going to kind of read you these three tests and brainstorm with me. One of them is significant services and substantial income. The claimant is engaged in substantial gainful activity, i.e., you ain't eligible for disability benefits if the claimant is providing, this is a term of art right here, significant services and receiving significant income. If the claimant is not receiving substantial income, the claimant can still, nevertheless, be found to be engaging in substantial gainful activity. So that is as vague as it gets. Basically saying if you are providing significant services towards your uh, business and receiving, I don't know, some amount of money, some sort of income, then we can still find that you are engaged in substantial gainful activity. That is one test that they've applied or they can apply. Social Security has a second test. It's called the comparability of work. If an individual's work activity in terms of all relevant factors such as hours, skills, energy output, efficiency, duties, and responsibilities is comparable to that of an unimpaired individual in the same community engaged in the same or similar business, then that is SGA. Let me read that again. I'm going to summarize that. That's basically saying if your work, the time you're putting in, the skills you're putting in, the energy, your duties, your responsibilities, if your work is comparable to that of somebody who is not disabled, then we're going to find that you are no longer eligible for disability benefits. We're going to find that you've engaged in substantial gainful activity, regardless of if you made money. You could have taken an L. You could have lost money. But if you are comparable, if your work is comparable to somebody who's not disabled, then we got a problem. And so I'm kind of looking at that and I'm thinking about that. And I mean, these are super broad, and it's not by accident. This is super broad stuff. The last test that they use, this is number three. Bear with me, Curtis. This is called your worth of work. And this is a quote. The individual's work activity, although not comparable to that of unimpaired individuals as indicated above in test two, is nevertheless clearly worth more than the amount shown for the particular calendar year in the SGA earnings when considered in terms of its value to the business and when compared to the salary an owner would pay to an employee for such duties in that business setting. And then they quote, I mean, all these examples. And I don't even know what that means. I mean, frankly, like that's basically they're saying like we've applied the first test, we've applied the second test, and if we can't get you with either of those two tests, then we got this third test, basically saying, you know, the value, we're considering the value of your work to your business when compared to the value of other people's works to similar businesses and what their salary, what their income is. So if they are making $3,000 a month and it's similar enough to what you're doing, then we're going to assume that you should be making $3,000 a month, which is pretty wild. Um, and then they kind of catch it all. Now this is a I've never seen this applied, but there is language that says a self-employed person is rendering significant services no matter how few hours per month he or she works if the business is a solo operation, a one person business. So that's them basically saying if you're doing this on your own and you are an actual like entity, like self-employed entity, and you are one of one, the only person associated with it, then any no matter how few hours you are working, that is significant services. So it's tough, it's scary, um, because at the end of the day, why we're doing this and why we're talking about all this stuff is because it's hard to make ends meet in any form or fashion if you're getting SSI in particular, 900 bucks a month, or if you're getting SSDI, maybe 15, 1600 bucks a month. It's hard in this day and time to make ends meet, right? We've all been hit by inflation. We've all been hit by rising housing costs. We've all been hit by, I mean, y'all know. And it's tough because more and more those SSI and SSDI payments aren't keeping folks afloat. And so part-time work is absolutely allowed. It is permitted and it is clear under the regulations that folks are allowed to go out and work. But what I want folks to just be aware of is if you're making more than 1,620 bucks, we got a problem. Keep it part-time. Keep it super part-time. My preference is I don't even want you triggering a trial work period at 1,100 bucks. So if you can keep it below 1,100 bucks a month, you're really not going to hear anything from Social Security. They're not going to care about what's going on. But you do need to report it. You do need to keep them posted. You do need to make sure they know when you started a job, when you stopped a job, how much did you earn. The more you can do that, the easier your life will be on down the road if you have any problems or if they allege an overpayment. Um, That's 50 minutes, Curtis. I mean, I don't want to go much longer than that, even though I feel like there's still a million things to talk about. But
We're good, Mike. We got one question or two questions that were in the chat, and I answered one of them. It was about someone's daughter who plans on attending college in 2 years. If she receives financial aid, will that affect her SSI? She may or may not ever be able to work full time consistently due to medical reasons. if this constantly fluctuates, how will she work with SSI, thinking ahead past college? And then I gave her the information for the college information on the SSA website
Okay.
for her to look at that. And also the Voc Rehab or that counselor person with Ticket to Work can also help her navigate those pieces as well.
Okay. And you're welcome to email me as well, because yeah, I mean that's a kind of a unique facts and
Right.
circumstances scenario for sure.
Right. And then we also had another question about a person who, attendee who received a letter from Centura Health Solutions about applying for SSI. I assume it's due to the fact that they hope that they have access to our health and medical records. The letter states that you may be able to get this income if you or your family member has a physical health problem or mental health problem. What that will last for a year? What mental health problems qualify? Also, can you get SSI if your child receives it already?
Yes.
And
So, oh, go
yes.
ahead. Go ahead.
So that's the question.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a good question. I can't. I don't know about the letter itself, but
Right.
the two very pointed questions is can I get SSI if my kid's getting SSI? And the answer is yes, yes, absolutely, you can. Um, they do put a household cap eventually on the most a family can get in SSI benefits, but don't let that. I mean, even I want to say it's a decent amount of money. So if you have a child in the house, even if you have two kids in the house and they're getting SSI, a parent can absolutely still get SSI. Mental health is one of my focuses in my practice. It is uh, that there are countless, quite literally, countless diagnoses that can qualify somebody for disability benefits or SSI benefits. I mean, everything from major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, whatever. It goes on and on and on. But here's the thing, and this is important: it ain't about your diagnoses. It's not. It's about how they come together and affect your day to day. One person's depression is completely different than somebody else's depression. One person's bipolar is completely different than somebody else's bipolar. So it's about how it affects your day to day. How does it limit your ability to go out and sustain a consistent day in, day out job? So that's the issue. I don't care what you've been diagnosed with. It is really about how it affects you. I hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. So we got 1 minute left or 2 minutes left. We want to thank Mike and thank all the attendees for coming today. Does Mike, do you have anything that you'd like to share? Your email at the end or any of that information, how to contact you, and also thank you again for sharing this great information. I learn a lot every time you talk. I learn a lot about SSI and SSDI. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.